In my video on the real enemy, I talked about the powers that be and their deceptions, and this time I want to focus more, not so much on unity in the conspiracy theory community, but on the tactics of the powers that be, and especially half-truths. So, because people often ask, why is it that the powers that be would let some truth out? Now, sometimes I don't think that's all up to their choice, because they don't have absolute control, and the question is, the problem for us is we don't know which half they have control of, or which, what percentage. So we know that there are bits of information that get out either by their design or by their lack of control. And some people would ask, well, why, if it's up to them, why they would let some truth out? And it's a known historical fact and psychological fact that a half-truth can be more effective than a total lie, because the idea is to fool people, and you can fool them best when you first appeal to something they already know to be true, or believe to be true, and then mix in some things that aren't true, and they will believe them because of the other things. So we have to be aware of that tactic and understand why various conspiracies suddenly come to the forefront. I think part of the time it's that lack of control of theirs. The internet has been a double-edged sword for them. We know they invented it, but at the same time, like any other form of media, it has to allow both sides. It has a good side and a bad side depending on which side you're on. And the internet has brought people together and made a lot of things apparent that wouldn't have been in the past because of the sheer speed and magnitude of the network. And I think this is something to a degree that has been unexpected. Now they try to infiltrate with shills and trolls and sock puppets and forums and social media, but that's not entirely effective. The truth, or at least as we all believe it to be, seems to get out anyway. And one of those things that they don't want out is that their whole science paradigm is wrong. We all know, at least a lot of us, we've come to understand that yesterday's conspiracy theory is today's fact. 9/11 was a major indication of that. I mean, when it first happened, everybody was so in shock that we didn't really critically examine a lot of things. But since then, more and more material has come out, and especially about Building 7, that there's no way, and no plane hit it. There were no fires on the outside of the building. They were all on the inside, and it's impossible for any of the other buildings to have affected it and caused those fires, especially they seem to be right in the center of the building. And it's a pretty big building. Yet it fell free fall speed into its footprint. That is a controlled demolition, and I'm not going to get into all that whole thing now. There's plenty of material you can look up, but the point is, it was a conspiracy theory, and now it's a conspiracy fact. Undeniable. And when you think about it, the official story itself was a conspiracy theory. I mean, they sold the story that some cavemen basically conspired to attack the United States and get past the world's strongest military machine without any effort, which is another indication of that. But the point being that conspiracy theories are not just paranoia, they're not insanity, they're legitimate questions that people raise, and to forbid them to raise them by mockery or law or whatever is perplexing, to say the least, because why hide the truth? If something is true, then what is the reason for fear that more truth would be discovered? But back to the half-truths, the issue is that we need to figure out which half is true, and that's why it shouldn't be none of us should be trying to suppress various viewpoints, even if we think they're ridiculous. And this is what happens with like NASA fakery, for example. I'm convinced that NASA is a propaganda organization first and foremost. And what happens, though, is that people with different theories tend to infight, as I was talking about in the Real Enemy video, where some, for example, believe that we went to the moon but with alternate technology, others that we didn't go at all, and that the video and photos we were shown were largely fabricated. But we have to, as I said, we have to unify on these things and remember who the real enemy is. Now, when it comes to probably the biggest and most taboo topic in conspiracy, that would be the flat Earth. There was there's an Illuminati card game. If you don't know about that, look it up. And one of the cards mentions flat Earth. And it says that flat earthers know something. Now, whether you take the Illuminati card game as anything but a psyop of its own, the point is that it seems to be a lot of us believe that the powers that be have to broadcast what they're going to do before they do it, one way or another, whether it's through cartoons or movies or card games. And in the Flat Earther card game, it says people laugh, but the Flat Earthers know something. And then it goes on to say the Flat Earthers' weird alternate geology has led them to a gold strike. What does that mean? Does it mean anything? Who knows? But the point is that by asking the question and raising the issue of basic astronomy and basic science methods, this can't be a bad thing. If it turns out the Earth is, any other shape, and there's theories about hollow Earth or concave Earth, we shouldn't laugh at those, because even if they turn out not to be true, the pursuit of finding the answer may lead to what the game called a gold strike. And I think the NASA fakery and 9/11 have been steps along that way. And so if we've learned any lessons from those, it is that we shouldn't just laugh when somebody tells us an idea that seems crazy at the time. But in particular about flat Earth, there seems to be something about it that really frightens the powers that be, and which is why I'm studying it, because they seem especially put off by this. Now, at the same time, it seems evident that in some ways they're promoting it. I mean, if anything gets on mainstream media, you can bet that it's not an accident, and they're not just reacting to social trends. There's a lot of predictive programming. That's a term you can look up too. But the fact is that flat Earth is a thing. And why would the powers that be, or as some call them, the powers that shouldn't be, why would they want to promote something that in one hand and mock it and oppose it in the other hand? And this is one of those half-truth examples. And I think in this case, the answer ties into a lot of other things. And this may be part of the gold strike. As a Christian and Bible student, I understand that there are fallen angels that have been trapped in a sort of prison called either the Abyss or Tartarus. They may be the same thing. It's not entirely clear if they're two different places, but I think they're the same thing. And these fallen angels were put there because they were messing with the human genome back in Genesis 6. And what they want is they want to be freed from their prison. And the CERN facility, with its strange occult imagery, such as the god of destruction, Shiva, and a statue at the front, and all the other symbology, I believe that it is an attempt to open the portal, to open the gate to the abyss, which only God has the key to, and I don't think they'll be successful in opening it until God says, okay, now you can do what you came to do and basically release all the demons of hell on earth. Yeah, there's a lot of that already released, but this is on another level. And a lot of people in the flat earth community see the flat earth with a dome over it as a prison, as a Truman Show. And in some sense that's true, but the powers that be, the fallen angels and their human puppets, want to be free as well. And for all their intelligence and experience of many thousands of years, they are unimaginative, they are uncreative, and they need us. They want us to help free them. That's why they're letting us pursue theories even as wild as flat earth. They want us to figure it out, the parts that they can't figure out, and release them from their prison before God says they should be released. Now the question is, if this is true, what should the flat earth community do? Well, we're not going to stop pursuing the truth, but on the other hand, we have to understand that every step of the way we're going to be studied, and we have to be careful what conclusions we draw from it, not just the shape of the earth and the size of the universe, the size of the stars and other luminaries, etc., but psychological and even religious and philosophical ideas that will lead us astray at some point. We hear a lot of different viewpoints. There are all kinds of people in the Flat Earth movement. There are Christians, there are atheists, there are quote-unquote New Agers. And I hear a lot of talk of people referring to channeled entities, or the stories you hear from David Icke and Zechariah Sitchin, I always say Stitchin, it's Sitchin, and this all paints a picture of a alien or interdimensional being, civilization, I guess I could call it, different races of them, and they battle, and there's good ones and bad ones, and various names, and a lot of it's drawn partially from ancient mythology. And as a Christian, I believe that these are, in part, deceptions, the usual half-truths. The fallen angels and their offspring, which were hybrid angel humans, and we call them demons or jinn, or depending on your culture, that these are the root of the ancient mythologies, such as the Titans. They were originally giants, and I believe that through experimentation all these thousands of years that they have made them more human in appearance. And that they tell us, especially like with UFO abductees, they want to promote a certain narrative, and this narrative is that these entities, whether they're the older conspiracy theory, I would call it, of the UFOs, where aliens come from outer space, they can't do that anymore if the Earth is flat, and they want that known. So they will turn to interdimensional entities, and that's exactly what demons are. So in a way it's the truth, but what's not the truth is that there are all these various races. There may be ranks of angelic beings, and there certainly are. And who knows whether there are ranks among demons. I'm sure there are, because Satan is all about hierarchy and chains of command. But these entities are not what they pass themselves off to be. There are no good ones. So when somebody channels somebody, good angels don't channel. They don't possess people. They may visit people, they may present themselves as humans that seem to appear out of nowhere and do a good deed and then disappear. But when it comes to channeling, that's not something that comes from anything good. It is a deception. It will be a half-truth. So there will always be some light and truth that they bring that's enough to convince a person that these entities should be trusted. So we have to be very careful in any branch of the conspiracy movement, if you can call it a movement, because the powers that be know what we're doing. They might even be helping us to find some of these things, by such as deliberately bad CGI in Apollo footage or other, ISS footage. It does seem apparent that they're actually trying to see who will pick up on their obvious fraud. And those of us who are have to be careful that we don't swallow everything they give us. And some of the treatment that people get for looking is to be expected, because that's part of the half-truth, that if, the powers that be always fight both sides of every war, and this is no exception. They will give you some promotion of Flat Earth and other conspiracies, and they will also oppose it to give the appearance of the false dilemma of the Hegelian dialectic. It's another term you can look up. And I see a lot of parallels with how Christianity has had to deal with these things for several thousand years. We're used to being on the fringe. We're used to being mocked. We're used to be given lip service in public in many respects, only to have it taken away. So I can expect that of Flat Earth and other conspiracies as well. They'll give us enough rope to hang ourselves if we're not careful. We're also, as Christians, used to being mocked, such as creationists, especially young Earth creationists. Various, the Christian community has been fragmented for a very long time. And I believe that's already happening to this conspiracy community, especially in Flat Earth. There's all sorts of personality clashes. So we just need to be careful. We need to keep our eyes open in more ways than one. We may be awakening, but we have to understand that we're dealing with entities that are much more experienced than we are at these things, and we're not the kind of people who are going to try to trick other people. And they know that, and that's the tactic they've used against Christians all these years. They know that we want to play by the rules and not do anything sneaky, and so they use that against us. So just a word of caution today about being a truly awake conspiracy theorist is more than discovering facts and trying to figure out who's telling the truth and which part of it's truth. We have to know that this is a opponent in a very complicated game with much more experience at the game, but they have a weakness, a major weakness, that being that they are their own evil. There is self-destructive, and just as many people believe that humans are abducted so that reptilians or whoever they are can take our blood or whatnot and rejuvenate themselves, they need us in that way, not just physically, but also mentally and spiritually. They can't sustain themselves. They need us, and they hate that they need us. And so the thing for us to do, how do you counter this sort of thing, is just to be relentless in the pursuit of truth and to stay focused on who the real enemy is, and not to give up, and not to be gullible. And the way not to be gullible is to keep educating yourself. So I just hope that I got a point across somewhere in here, and talk to you again some other time.